So 3 things to consider when trauma clients are stuck. I just want to say welcome to this masterclass. Welcome to being with us and chatting with us and having this evening. We're going to be about an hour of just talking about trauma and treating clients who are stuck and helping them to kind of move through. And then we're going to talk a little bit about a course that I'm offering here at the end. And if you have any questions about anything, feel free to pop into the chat box. I'll go through that at the end and do a question and answer. It's going to be a little bit hard for me to be able to see. I'm seeing now the chat box because of the way that the screen opens up on the MacBook. It just makes it a little bit more difficult for me to see. So I will actually be trying to see, oh, wait a minute. I can see it a different way. So I'll be working 2 screens. I actually have 2 screens here. So yeah, we're gonna go ahead and get started, and I will be checking my notes. I wrote down some notes and stuff that we can do. So first thing I wanna say is self-care. As we're talking about trauma, as we're talking about treating trauma, it can sometimes be very triggering for us as clinicians to hear things because some of us have our own trauma history. I would say probably most of us have our own trauma history. It's hard pressed to find anyone in the world today who haven't experienced some type of trauma. And so as we are going through the material, as we're talking about things, I want you to also be mindful of yourself, be mindful of what's happening for you, and making sure that you're taking good care of yourself. So if you need to step away, if you need to check out and tune back in, and whatever you need to do, feel free. I'm giving you total permission to take care of yourself in this process. I want you to be healthy and happy, and really be able to take in the information that I am sharing. So please make sure that you take care of yourself. As I stated, for the question and answers, I can see the chat box, so feel free to stick questions in there. I'm going to be asking different questions throughout. So please make sure that you chat back and forth because there is going to be a drawing. So what I'll do is I'll take all the people that participated in the chat box. I'll take your names and kind of put them in a little cup or something, and I'll do a drawing on Thursday. I'm going to go live on Thursday to talk a little bit and answer questions about treating trauma with the body and brain and mind, which I'll talk a little bit about in a minute, but I'm going to be talking a little bit about that. So I'm going to put all of your guys' names in a jar, and whoever participates, I will do a drawing for a $10 Amazon gift card. And so I'll do 2 of those drawings. So if you participate tonight in the chat box and we have conversation back and forth and you make comments and just be interactive with me tonight, then that will be rewarded by being entered into a drawing. So I appreciate your guys' participation. Just a way to encourage you. It's late, at least for me here in Michigan, it is late. So, I just want to give you some motivation to get involved. So I have one new message. Let me see. Oh, that's Gladys saying hello to everyone. All right, so let's go on to our next slide. A little about me. So in this picture here, you will see my husband, who is a Army veteran, and he is still active at this time. We are stationed here in Michigan, so we are an Army family. We are Army strong, and that's my son, who is 9 years old. He's a ball of energy and just has lots of things. Like right there in that picture, he's doing something, probably more than likely throwing rocks into water or something. So he is busy, and so this is my family. We live in Michigan currently, and we've lived in Kansas, Virginia, and Alabama. And so we are looking to actually be relocated here in the next year. The Army will move us again, and so we're looking forward to new adventures and new places to explore. But here's a little bit about me. Here's my family, a little bit about, I was born and raised in Virginia. I met my husband in Kansas. He was stationed in Kansas at Fort Riley, if anyone's familiar with Kansas, and I was at Kansas State University. So a little bit about me professionally. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in Michigan, and I used to be in Virginia, but I didn't change this. I'm actually no longer licensed in Virginia at this time. I decided that I was just going to focus on where I was, and I'm here in Michigan, so that's where I've held my license for the last couple of years. I graduated from Kansas State University Marriage and Family Therapy program. I am trained in eye movement and desensitization reprocessing. And I'm currently completing my certification in somatic experiencing. I've completed all of my trainings. I just have 5 more consultations I need to do And so I'm hoping to be finished by early next year so that I can say that I am a somatic experiencing practitioner. Somatic experiencing is a body-based trauma treatment modality. If you've never heard of it, I encourage you to check it out. I'll be talking a little bit about some of the principles tonight in our masterclass, so you'll learn a little bit about it if you've never heard about it, but definitely would encourage you to look it up if you've never heard of it. It's a pretty cool training. Treating trauma across the lifespan for 15 years. I started out treating children, and then I have decided at this point in my journey, I don't know if I'll go back and treat children or not, but I've decided at this point to just work with adults and mainly adult women. I do have a couple of males on my caseload, but the majority of them are adult women. I enjoy working solely with 40-year-old, kind of 30 to 40-year-old women who are struggling with effects of childhood trauma. So things that are coming up from their past that's impacting their present and really limiting their future. So that's a little bit about me professionally. The thing that I'm most passionate about, which I've already kind of mentioned, and you guys have all said that, most of you guys that voted said that you are part of the Trauma Treatment Collective, is this community that I've been building over the last year and a half or so. I am really passionate about helping therapists grow and develop their skills because I feel like a lot of focus is on the client and helping the client get over trauma. But there's not a lot of focus on the therapist who's doing the work with the client. And we can be affected just as much as the client can be sometimes if we don't take good care of ourselves and if we don't have the skills that we need in order to maneuver trauma. It can be really impactful to us in a negative way. And so I'm really passionate about making sure that I help to create an environment and a community that supports therapists and helps them grow and helps them have a place that they can come and ask questions and just be supported, because it's hard work that we do and it can get really lonely because we can't talk about our work as much. So it can get really lonely. And so having other therapists who understand the work and understand the language and understand all the things is really helpful. And so I'm really passionate about the Trauma Treatment Collective and creating a community that's supported to therapists who are either coming right out of school, who are already out of school, who may be long gone in their private practice. I just want it to be a place for all trauma therapists to come together and feel supported. So that's really important to me. So Gladys is saying, I treat trauma and want to support trauma supervisors to be better. Awesome. I think that's awesome. I think the more we can support each other, the more we can help each other, the better the work that we do. I'm a firm believer in embodiment and really living out the principles that we're teaching our clients, that we also live them. So the more that we're taking care of ourselves and growing our skills and doing all of those things, the better we're going to show up in the therapy room. All right. So clients stuck in their trauma healing process. So when you're thinking about clients being stuck in their trauma healing process, it's really an interesting thing. So trauma is, it's really built on, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this in a minute, but trauma is really built on kind of being stuck in the nervous system. And so when you think about trauma being stuck in the nervous system, hey, we're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like in the therapy room. Okay? Clients stuck in their trauma healing process. Trauma, let's talk a little bit about trauma. Different forms of hard things that have happened to us, what overwhelm our nervous system. So these are different forms. So when we're talking about trauma, just so we're all on the same kind of playing field, trauma is different forms of hard things that have happened to us that overwhelm our nervous system. So there's different kinds of trauma. You have single incident trauma. So when you think about single incident trauma, you're thinking about car accidents and maybe a sexual assault or something like that that just happened one time. Then you have more complex trauma, which is over multiple times or over time. Things are happening to a person and it's just kind of building upon one thing after another. And then you have more developmental trauma, which sometimes can be also known as complex trauma, but developmental trauma is focused on over the lifespan, over developmental. Some people say developmental trauma is from 0 to 18. Other people say it's from 0 until you end life. So it just depends on what house you're coming out of as far as your school of thought. But when we're talking about developmental trauma, for the most part, people are talking from 0 to 18. So those are some different forms of trauma that you may encounter in the therapy room. And I think it's important to kind of be able to identify what type of trauma you're working with, because that's going to determine what type of modality you're using. Some modalities are really great for single incident traumas. One that comes to mind is like prolonged exposure, really great for single incident traumas, or CBT, really great for single incident traumas, because it really kind of focuses in and helps the person to process that event. Complex trauma, maybe you're going to have to use something like EMDR that's going to really kind of get more at the subcortical levels of the brain. That's kind of under the prefrontal cortex, or the thinking part of the brain. So it's getting back to more of the reptilian part of the brain. And so that's going to be things like EMDR, somatic experiencing, more of the body-based kinds of modalities are going to be really helpful for complex trauma and developmental trauma. Can you treat complex trauma with the other modalities? Sure. Can you treat single incident traumas with the other modalities? Sure. But if you want to be effective and efficient, then you want to find the modality that's best suited for the type of trauma that you're treating. And so I encourage therapists to have a wide tool belt, a variety of tools in their tool belt, so that if you do run into different types of trauma, maybe someone comes in for a single incident trauma and they don't recognize that they have complex trauma. And so as you start to work with them, you start to realize, oh my gosh, they have complex trauma. So then you have the tools to be able to help them to kind of dig more deeper into their past and be able to unpack some of the things that have happened to them over time. So that's something to really think about. So when you're thinking about the parasympathetic, you're thinking about hypoaroused. That's more of that depressed kind of symptomology, withdrawal, isolation, those kinds of things. When you're thinking about sympathetic, you're thinking about more of the hyperaroused. It's more of the anxious presentation. And so trauma is basically thinking about, okay, where is my client stuck? Where are they showing more of that hyper-aroused or that hypo-aroused? And more than likely, clients come into our office and they're specifically saying that they're feeling overwhelmed, they're feeling like they can't stop their thoughts from going, they feel like they're constantly under tension, they're constantly feeling like their heart's pounding, those kinds of things. Or they're coming in saying they're super depressed, they don't want to do anything, they just kind of feel like they just want to withdraw from the world, or maybe they're more suicidal and they're having struggles with that. So when you're thinking about that, you're thinking, okay, is this hyper aroused or more of that sympathetic nervous system, or is it hyper aroused and hypo-aroused and more of that parasympathetic? And we're going to talk more about this, and I'm going to show you a actual slide that really kind of lays it out in a more visual way. But really, you're looking for that pattern of stuckness. And so when you think about that, and the idea of, okay, clients come in with this pattern of stuckness, trauma is developed out of stuckness. So being stuck can be a very common part of the healing journey. And so I just say that to kind of normalize this idea of stuckness. I think when we can normalize it for clients and we can normalize it for ourselves, we don't panic when we see it. A lot of times if we see things and we feel like our clients are not doing well and we feel like they're not moving like we want them to, sometimes we can panic, which then causes some problems and causes us to not be able to help them as efficiently, or they feel like they're really quote unquote broken, those kinds of things. But when we see it as, oh, this is a part of the process, this is a part of their presentation, and we see it from that lens, it can be really helpful in helping us to think through, okay, how do we want to address this stuckness? So let's talk a little bit about signs and symptoms of stuckness. So before I show my signs and symptoms of stuckness, when you were thinking about coming to this webinar, what are some signs and symptoms that you guys see? What are some things that you commonly see in your office, in the therapy room, that says, hey, this client is really struggling with being stuck? And I'll give you guys some time to type in some thoughts there. All right. Let's see what's coming up. Clients can't move forward even if they learn the tools to work with them. Yeah, definitely. So the clients have all of these tools, they have all these things that they are, you've given them, you guys have practiced it in session, but then when they get out into the world, it seems like it dissipates and it doesn't quite translate. It's not generalized into their day-to-day activities. Or maybe they're not even doing them in session. Sometimes I've had clients who really struggle to even engage in coping skills in session. So I know they're struggling out in the world. So they're not utilizing the tools that they have. Inability to move past, yes. So they kind of keep circling back around and wanting to talk about the trauma and process it and tell you the story again, and it just feels like you're kind of going around the same mountain in the same situation. Another thing that I will see is clients' inability to move past, as far as like, maybe it's not the same situation, but it has the same pattern. Like, so it's different things, like maybe in their job, in their family life, in their friendships, the same pattern keeps showing up of maybe they're blowing up in anger, or they are being avoidant of situations and circumstances. And it just shows up in different parts of their life, but it's the same thing when you really kind of whittle it down and kind of get to the bottom. Not even wanting to express it. Yeah, so sometimes clients really struggle with the ability to even talk about it. So you know it's there, it's kind of like the pink elephant in the room, but they're not able to really talk about what's happening for them. And if you try to broach the subject, then they pull away, or they clam up, or they retreat in some type of way, whether they retreat out your office or they just retreat and kind of shut down. They have an inability to really have the, what I like to call, capacity to be able to look at the trauma and talk about it. All right, keeping with the same thoughts and beliefs even when presented with new, healthier options. Yeah, so just that inability to change, that inability to shift their mindset or their thoughts or their beliefs about situations and circumstances. Yeah, great things, guys. Thanks for sharing. All right, let's see what I wrote down. Continual chaos in everyday life. So clients are coming in reporting fire after fire. I like to call them fires, because it's like these things are just falling apart in their everyday life. And it's just going on and on and on. A sense of holding on to symptoms, presentations such as depression and anxiety. We talked a little bit about that. So you have these tools, you have these things that you can do, but it's almost like you're holding on to the other things, and you're not able to really move forward or make change. And then the good old one, missing sessions. So calling right before a session, or just not showing up for sessions, kind of bailing on you. That can be a sign of stuckness as well. Just that avoidance is showing up. So yeah. All right, let's see. Oh, Nashana says black and white thinking. That's a good one. A lot of times I work with clients on calling, like, we got to get some gray thinking in here. The reason why clients have black and white thinking is it's very safe. If I can put things in categories and boxes, then I know how to deal with them. But if you stand in the middle, I don't quite know how to deal with you. I don't quite know how to respond to that situation if it's in the middle. But if I can categorize it, then I can put rules around that. And when I can put rules around that, that helps me to feel safe. So that's that black and white thinking coming up. Amy, you said you used to call your husband a fireman. Yeah, I'm like, man, I'm not a fireman. I don't want to be going and putting out fires. All right, so what can we do? What can we do? We're going to talk a little bit about some things we can do. And I'm going to go through a couple of different things. These are going to be the 3 things that I talked about in the title to consider. And the first one's going to be all about safety. So considering clients' sense of safety. That's the number one thing. If you start to notice a client is stuck, I'm going to have you go back to the kind of the first part of your treatment is establishing safety. And that's, we do that through building rapport with the client. We do that through them having a sense of safety within themselves. There's lots of different things that we do, and we're going to talk about some of those different things you can do. But if you get down into treatment and a client starts to kind of stall out, and you start to notice that they are struggling a little bit and they're feeling a little bit stuck, then I will take clients back out of the processing phase of treatment, which I talk about in treating trauma with the brain and the body in my phases of treatment. I'll take them out of the processing phase of treatment back to safety, and we'll start doing some things to reestablish safety. The way I do that is thinking about, okay, what's threatening safety? Say, for instance, a client runs into a perpetrator. They have a sexual assault history, they run into a perpetrator, and that just unravels them. So now we've got to reestablish safety. We got to help them have a sense of safety within their body and also within their community, like their home and those kinds of things. And so we start to work on making sure that we're doing that and getting that back in place. So here's a couple of ways that you can work on safety with a client. Sometimes it's establishing safety, and then sometimes it's reestablishing safety. So you have safety already established, and then you got to go back and reestablish it if something comes in and kind of threatens that safety. So we're going to talk a little bit about boundary work. We're going to talk about safety planning and crisis planning. We're going to talk about calming and coping strategies, and then we're going to talk about felt sense of settled in or less than during session. So we're going to talk about each of these individually. Let's move into boundary work. So boundary work is a really nice way of kind of helping clients to get a sense of safety, because it really starts with them as a client. And so when it's them as a client, it really helps them to kind of feel what safety feels like in their body, within themselves, and then to be able to talk about how do they keep that and maintain that in relationship to others. So I provide a lot of psychoeducation about boundary work. I recommend Henry Cloud's book, Boundaries. So I just really give them a lot of psychoeducation about it. And then I actually do an activity with them where I use yarn. And I use a roll of yarn, a ball of yarn, and I just have them create a shape with that yarn. And I have them kind of work within that shape. And I have them stand in that shape and talk in that shape and just feel what it feels like to have this space that they've created. And their shape can be as big or as small as they feel like that feels good to them. And we talk about that. Like if they take up the whole room, we talk about that. Like, wow, you must need a lot of space to feel like you need safety. Or if they just wrap it around their feet really close, then I talk about, wow, you don't need a lot of space. What is it like to have that close quarters? And so we process that. And you can process the yarn activity 50 million ways. There is no right or wrong. There's no kind of like, and then you say this, and then you say that. You really just give them the yarn, and you have them create the shape, and then you have them talk about what they notice as they create the shape. What does it feel like? I've had clients sometimes create the shape and not be able to stand in it, and that's really telling about the fact that they don't feel like they deserve boundaries. Maybe you would have them kind of talk a little bit about why they feel like they can't stand in it and those kind of things. I've had clients stand in it and have a sense of relief because they're like, wow, it's so nice to have my own space. And so we talk about that. So really it can go 50 million different directions, but it's always usually good stuff that comes out of it because it really is a powerful activity. My clients will say, I didn't know string could do so much when they think about the work that they're doing with just talking about their boundaries. It's a really nice visual for your clients who are a little more visual. They are able to use that. And so it's just taking string. I have a big old bag of string, different colors, different textures, just all kinds of different yarn that I found at like the thrift store or something. And I just offer it to them. And I say, I just want you to pick something that resonates with you. And sometimes they'll pick things that have sparkles in it. Sometimes, so interesting, my clients will pick string that matches the floor, my carpet color. And so almost the boundary kind of dissipates when they put it on the floor because it kind of blends in with my carpet. And so that's something we talk about. It's like, what is it like to put it down and it erases? Like, is that similar to what it feels like in your life? And so we'll talk a little bit about that. And sometimes it's spot on and sometimes it's not, but you can just ask questions. And usually I frame questions and I'm just curious, what is it like to kind of put your string down and then it kind of almost disappears with the carpet? What is that like for you? And I just encourage them to be curious about it and to check in with themselves and see what they notice. So that's boundary work. And that's how I do boundary work, is by using the string. Let's see. The next one is safety planning and crisis planning. So usually I do safety planning with clients who are maybe leaving domestic violence situations or getting out of some situation that's not safe for them. And safety planning is more of like, okay, do you have your bag packed? Do you have your important documents in the bag? Do you have, what are the things that you need in order to be able to make a safe transition from the dangerous situation you're in to a more safe situation? Crisis planning, on the other hand, is more when I have a client who maybe has like suicidal ideations and things like that. And this is more of where I talk a little bit about internal and external coping skills. Or a client who has a tendency to kind of really go high into the sympathetic or into the sympathetic nervous system, where they get really anxious and they kind of almost put themselves into a panic attack. I may do a crisis plan with them. or a person who goes super low and maybe they become suicidal when they're in more of that parasympathetic or that hypo-aroused state. So I may do a crisis plan. In the crisis plan, I'm talking about what are signs and symptoms that tell them that they're in a crisis. And the reason why I don't use it like a suicidal, no suicide contract or something like that, because I don't want to limit it just to suicide. I want to open it up to any crisis, whatever they consider a crisis. So what would be signs and symptoms that they are moving towards crisis? So I had them think about what their body's doing. I had them think about what their thoughts are like. I had them think about what their behaviors become. And I had them write those down and just list them out. So they may say, I notice tightness in my chest, or I notice that I'm isolating, or I notice that I'm not eating as much. So anything you can get them to identify that says, hey, this is something that you, we're moving towards a crisis and we need to kind of pay attention to that. Sometimes clients have a really hard time identifying what they look like in crisis or what they look like as they're moving to a crisis. So if they have support systems, I may ask them to ask their support systems, or if there's someone in the room with them participating in therapy, I may have them participate and say what they see, just to help the client get a sense of what's coming up for them. Then I have them talk a little bit about their internal and external coping skills. Internal coping skills could be things like things that they can do by themselves, not anyone else involved, just solely things they can do. These are going to be like your breathing, your breath work. This is going to be like your being able to identify 5 things I see, 4 things I hear, 3 things I smell, you know, those kinds of things. The grounding techniques is what I was looking for. So these are the things that you're teaching clients to do on a daily basis in your sessions. And so these are going to be the things that they're writing down, the ones that work for them. And so usually I will go through 3 coping skills with a client in the very beginning. Usually like the second session, I'm teaching 3 coping skills. And usually what I'm doing with that is using that as an assessment to kind of see which ones they respond to the best. And then I'm going to find more coping skills like that, because that's telling me that their system really likes that type of coping skill. And really you're looking for what gives them the most deepest kind of sense of grounding or relaxation, or just a big shift in the way that they feel and think and kind of how they are all, kind of overall. And so as you're thinking about that, you see that, then you're going to look for more things like that. So if breath work really works for a client, then you're going to look for more breath work activities. If visualization really works for a client, then you're going to look for more visualization activities. And you just want to kind of build them up in that area. And then you can try to, you know, get them to experiment with other ones that maybe they don't respond to as well. But in the beginning, you really want to go with what works, and really build up that repertoire of coping skills that they have, so that they have plenty of things that they can use to help them with regulation. So that's what I'm writing in that section. In the next section, I have external coping skills. And if you stay to the end, you're going to actually get all of these interventions that I'm talking about in a written form. So if you are fiercely writing notes, you don't have to, because I'm going to give this all to you. If you stay to the end, you'll get a link to get all of these directly sent to your email box, all nicely typed up for you. So I just want to say that because I know maybe people are writing a lot. Okay, let me keep trucking because I'm running out of time here because we've had so many technical difficulties. So in the next section, you're going to do external coping skills. External coping skills are going to be reaching out to others. So these are people that they feel like are their supports. This can be hotlines and things like that, or it even can be you as their therapist. So anyone that they can reach out to if they are feeling overwhelmed and they are feeling like they're in a crisis or they're moving towards a crisis, to help them to regulate, to kind of get back to a place of being able to feel good and feel okay. All right. So that is safety planning. Let me see. How do I? Here's a question. How do I move to the next screen? Oh goodness. All right. Calming and coping strategies. Calming and coping strategies are things that I was just talking about, as far as things that you can do to help clients to build regulation or build capacity in their nervous system. Capacity and regulation are used a lot of times interchangeably. When we're talking about regulation, it is creating capacity, ability for them to hold their emotion and be with their emotion and kind of talk through what's going on for them. So I think it's really good to help them kind of build that up. Now, this can be done a couple of different ways. I have a couple of different ones I'll share with you. Again, I won't share them all because you will be able to get this all when you stay to the end. You'll get the resource. So being able to do things like I talked about: visualization, breath work, guided meditation, a safe, calm place, which is from the EMDR work. If you EMDR trained or ever heard about EMDR, they're big on the safe and calm place as a part of their protocol, which is basically visualization. Grounding techniques, for example, 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste. That's a really great grounding technique. Or you can use aromatherapy with essential oils. So those are some of the coping and calming strategies that you can teach clients to help them with safety. The more that they can do that, the more that they can kind of bring themselves down if they're feeling more on the anxious or hyper aroused state, the better. And the more they can bring themselves up if they're more in that hypo aroused or that more depressed state, the more that they can bring themselves up, the better. So that's going to help with them feeling safe. All right. That felt sense of feeling settled. So this is settled or feeling settled or less than during session. So this is really big because most of our clients, when they come into sessions, they tell you all about the horrible things that they feel, maybe in their body, or the horrible things that they think, or the horrible emotions that they're experiencing. And so when you talk so much about something and you spend so much time thinking about it, that's all you feel. That's all you have a record of, if you will. And so what we want to do to help them with safety is to notice when they feel less of that, or when they feel more settled. What does that feel like in their body? They can tell you, all the details about what doesn't feel great and how it feels and what they think, and just all the details about the unpleasant sensations. But we really want them to notice when they are able to use their coping skills, or they're able to do the breath work and those kinds of things. What does it feel like in their body? What do they notice? And it may be a little less. It may not be that, my chest is not tight anymore at all. It may be, I notice a little less tightness in my chest. Great. Enjoy that. Notice that. Bring your attention to that. Those are things that I say to clients because I want them to start having a record of what it feels like to feel less. What does it feel like to be settled? So if you do a coping skill and you find that the client is feeling really relaxed, you want to spend as much time as you can helping them just to enjoy that and to feel what that feels like in their body. Some clients, if you bring attention to it, they'll automatically pop out and kind of go back to the negative place. And you just say, okay, and you'll just spend a little less time the next time. Other clients can really kind of hang out in this place and really enjoy it. And so you want to stay there as long as that client can tolerate it and not go back to a negative place. You want to really hang out there and really help them to feel what it feels like to be settled or to be less than during session. Because the more that they can know what that is, the more they're going to gravitate to that. And so we're fighting against kind of these old patterns of just being in the negative all the time. Okay. All right, let's see. All right, so number 2, that's number 1. So number 1 is safety. Number 2 is considering the client's attachment styles. Now, attachment work is basically kind of thinking through John Bowlby's work, where he talks about there's basically 3 types of attachment style. You have secure attachment, anxious, ambivalent, and avoidant. There's actually a third one in there, which is called disorganized attachment, but we're not going to talk about that today because more than likely they're not showing up in therapy if they have disorganized attachment, especially if they're adults. They may be if they're children because someone's bringing them, but usually adults who struggle with disorganized attachment really struggle to even get in the therapy room. They're going to be more like your people who are in treatment facilities and those kinds of things. So attachment styles and therapeutic relationships. When you think about attachment styles, you think about the child and the parent because it's really developed between 0 and 3. But how we learn to do relationship from 0 to 3 is usually how we do relationship on throughout our life with everything. So when you find a client's attachment style, you're able to kind of see it being threaded through everything that they do. Either they're going to be super secure and they're going to have really healthy relationships. More than likely, they're probably not coming to see us. Or they're going to be anxious, ambivalent, or avoidant. And usually those are the two ones that you see. But we're going to spend time talking about all three of them. But this is the second thing I want you to consider if your client is stuck, because this one can kind of slip under the radar and we don't pay it as much attention. But it can be really helpful and it can be really powerful when we think about how we interact with our clients and knowing our own attachment style, while also looking at how our client's attachment style is, how those two things may be interacting with one another, our attachment style and their attachment style. Okay. So secure attachment in the therapeutic relationship. This is going to look like a client who comes to therapy. They are engaged in the therapy process. They're talking about what's going on. They're sharing their thoughts and their feelings. They're taking in your advice. They're like your perfect client, if you will. And I know there's no perfect client, but sometimes we'll see glimmers of this in clients where they're really engaged in the process and they really feel secure in the process and they're really kind of present in the room. And usually when you're thinking about secure attachment in the therapeutic relationship, these clients are present, they're giving you space to kind of be the professional and be the person that's guiding them through this process, but they're also showing up in that relationship and talking about how they feel, how things are impacting them that you're saying. They're talking about things that don't set right with them. They're talking about things that are working good for them. They are just really super engaged in the process. So this is kind of like our model client. This is a client we all want. Anxious ambivalent attachment in a therapeutic relationship is not so much. An anxious ambivalent attachment style is basically where the person is super focused on the adult or the caregiver or the therapist. And so all of their thought, all of their attention, all of their focus is on that person. And so they don't know what they feel. They don't know how they think. They don't know anything about what's going on inside of them because they don't have time to focus on them, because they're scared if I take my eyes off of this person, then they won't love me. They won't care about me. They won't help me. In the therapeutic relationship, it is they won't help me, or they'll think I'm a bad person. And so they spend most of their time performing and working really hard to be able to perform for us in the therapy room, that they're not really in touch with what's going on with them. And so this can really be hard in the trauma treatment process because they're just telling you what they think you want to hear. They're not being honest about how they feel. They're not being honest about what they think. They're not being honest about what they're doing outside of the therapy session, because they're just saying whatever they think is going to make you feel better. Or they'll say things, I've had experiences where clients will say to me, I don't want you to judge me, but, I don't want you to think bad of me, but this is what happened. And so all of their energy is in worrying about what I'm thinking versus about what's happening on the inside of them and being able to be a part of that process. They're so thinking outside of themselves that they have a hard time staying connected with themselves. Actually, in an anxious ambivalent attachment relationship, they lose connection with themselves. It's all about the other person. They know what the other person likes. They know what the other person wants to do, but they have no idea what they want to do and what they like. Okay. So let's move on to the last one, which is the avoidant attachment style in a therapeutic relationship. This is the person who, and I forgot to mention this, but usually you're going to see a person's attachment style when they're under stress or just duress. When they're under those things, then you're going to see that attachment style kind of bubble up. And so when you're thinking about an avoidant attachment style, this is going to be the situation where that person is very cut off. They're going to kind of go in, they go recluse, and that's what I say. It's hard for you to connect with them. It's hard for you to get them to do any kind of change or any kind of movement in the therapeutic process because they are cut off, they are shut down. This person has learned over time from their caregivers that their feelings, their thoughts do not matter. So why even share them? That's what they're thinking. I don't care, you don't care, so why am I even talking to you about this? So they usually are like, I don't know, I don't care, I'm done. They're very avoidant based on the name of it, but they're very avoidant of doing anything in the therapeutic relationship because they're kind of in that place where they don't feel safe and they are kind of shut down. And so a lot of times you'll see this with clients who are stressed and they just become real combative in session. And when they're really combative in session, it's really hard for them to stay connected to you. And so that's really important there too. All right, let's go to the next one. So ways to help clients through attachment challenges. You definitely want to provide psychoeducation about attachment styles in the therapeutic relationship. Then you want to openly label attachment patterning. So if you see it happening in the therapy room, you want to take the time to openly label that. And you want to make sure that you let the client know that, hey, I think this is going on for us. And when I see this, this is what I'm going to do, or I'm going to gently mention it to you. And so when you're openly labeling their attachment patterning, you want to help them to understand that you're not judging them, you're not angry at them, you're not upset with them about it. You want to help them to be able to just be able to start to notice when they're in that place, and then to move more towards that secure attachment with you. And then speaking directly to the client's safety. I don't know if you guys can see my chat box there, but I'll move it out of the way. So speaking directly to the client's safety within the therapeutic relationship is really important also. So you could talk about like, hey, you know, I'm here to support you, I'm here to help you, and you could kind of talk around it, but I just talk directly to it. And I found that to be most helpful with my clients. You're safe. I'm going to be here. You don't have to worry about me abandoning you. I'm in this with you. You're safe in this relationship. Anything that I can say to them, even though they're not saying I don't feel safe with you, but their behavior is saying they don't feel safe with me. Either they're in that anxious, ambivalent state or that avoidant state. And when they're feeling that way, it's really helpful for them to be able to, for you to be able to speak directly to that safety and say, hey, you're good, you're okay, you're safe in this relationship. I know it's hard for you to trust me, but I'm here for you. I'm going to be consistent. I'm going to show up for you. Okay. So that's that. Please let me know if you guys have any questions in the comment section. And I will be more than happy to answer them. All right. So psychoeducation, I talked about that, about the attachment styles in the therapeutic relationship, just really talking about it, really sharing information with them. Openly labeling the attachment patterning, talked about that. And then the last one is speaking directly to the client's safety within the therapeutic relationship. That's there as well. So last thing, third thing, thanks for hanging in there with me, considering client's nervous system patterning. This is probably my favorite one. When you think about a client's nervous system pattern, this is what I was talking about in the beginning when I was talking about I was going to give you a diagram that kind of shows what that nervous system pattern is. So here's a client who is has a nervous system. So that normal range is the dotted line kind of going through the middle where you see normal range there on your right-hand side of your page. But what happens when a traumatic event happens is that it goes haywire, and that's that red line. The gray line going through the middle is what we would like to see in our clients, that healthy nervous system, where they're going to have that more that sympathetic nervous system or that hyper aroused, but they're going to be able to maintain that within the normal range and kind of come down into that hypo aroused and then go back up into that hyper aroused. And they're basically doing that throughout the day. This is what helps us get up in the day and do what we got to do. And then we rest a little bit, and then we do what we got to do, and then we rest a little bit. That's a nice regulated nervous system. When a client has trauma in their history, they are doing the spikes. And so they're either getting that stuck on, which is more that anxious, panic, hypervigilant, hyperactivity, exaggerated startle response, emotional flooding. That's more that stuck on presentation. And then when they're on that stuck off presentation, they're going to be more depression, flat affect, lethargy, deadness, exhaustion, chronic fatigue, disorientation. All of those things are going to start. So when you're thinking about tracking a client's nervous system and paying attention to where they are, you may see that more stuck on, which looks like they're just kind of cycling around in the more anxious kind of presentation, or you may see that stuck off, which looks like they're cycling around in that stuck off presentation. And so the more you can help a client get back to that normal range, the more it creates capacity for them to move and make change. But if we try to make change in those stuck off and stuck on states, then it doesn't work. And that's usually what we run into is that we're trying to make change in those states. And it's very frustrating for the client and for us as a therapist. But we have to get regulation into the system to get them back into that middle stage so that we can help them to make change, because that's where they do their best work. That's where their brain makes change. That's where all of those things happen. Okay. So let's talk about how we help clients with overactivation in the nervous system. So overactivation, again, is anytime that they're in those red lines where they're more in the high stuck on or the low stuck off. Overactivation in the sympathetic nervous system, again, the sympathetic nervous system is more that anxiety, kind of hypervigilance, racing heart, those kinds of things. That's more of that presentation. We can help them do three things that can help them. Other things can help them, but these are three things I'm going to share with you tonight. Orienting to pleasure, grounding, and self-touch and nurturing talk. Orienting to pleasure is basically, and I think this is also in the handout that I'm going to give you, so don't feel like you have to feverishly write down things, but orienting to pleasure is basically finding something pleasant in their environment and taking it in. So that could be like a beautiful color, that could be a beautiful flower, that could be a beautiful pattern, that could be a dust bunny on the wall. Whatever they feel like is pleasant in that moment, really just allowing themselves to rest there and to be with that thing. And normally what happens when they're orienting to pleasure, it brings up other pleasant thoughts. So I have this picture in my office that oftentimes people will look at and they will think about vacations at the beach and how great of a time it was and how wonderful a time they had. But that picture doesn't have anything about the beach in it, but it's just the type of wood and the type of painting on the wood that causes that feeling and that memory to come up. So sometimes clients will orient to pleasure and then it will take them off to something else. I tell clients that as long as they're with something that's positive and pleasant, they can stay there. They can enjoy it, they can take it in. But as soon as it shifts to something that's unpleasant or negative, then we need to move back to the pleasant thing. Grounding is basically taking time to really kind of just feel themselves and connect with themselves. And so usually I tell people to check in with their feet, their seat, and their back to see which part of their body feels most present right now. A lot of times people will say their feet. Oh, they'll also say their hands as well. And once they notice what part of their body feels most present, then I just have them kind of take all of their attention to that part of their body and just really enjoy that connection with gravity or with the floor or with the seat. And I have them kind of focus in on just feeling grounded. Then the next one is self-touch and nurturing talk. Self-touch and nurturing talk is a really great thing there. Is just basically any place that they feel activation in their body. So that could be tightness in the chest. I have them place their hand there in a nurturing way with intention to support themselves. And then I have them talk make nurturing statements to themselves. So they may say, oh, this feels really, this feels really good, or I'm going to be okay, or I'm okay, or I'm going to get through this. Whatever they feel like they need to hear in that moment, I'll have them kind of either say that out loud or say it to themselves. But that's the nurturing talk piece. Gladys says, I teach family roles to each client. I can add in attachment styles to that. Yes, that would be great. I think the more and more we talk about attachment styles and helping people to notice their ways of doing relationship, the more enlightening it is for people to kind of have more information on, oh, this is why I do this, or this is why I do that. So yeah, I think that would be great, Gladys. All right, so overactivation in the parasympathetic nervous system. So this is more of that depression kind of presentation and withdrawal, isolation, those kinds of things. So you're gonna want to get movement in the body. Movement can be a lot of different things. So I have pushing, stretching are two that I would recommend. If clients are not wanting to do those big muscle kinds of movements, then you can have them just gently kind of just stretch their fingers, or just roll their wrists, or roll their ankles, or just wiggle their toes, or wiggle their fingers. Any little movement that you can get them to make is going to help. I have these white kind of like, they're called snowballs, but they're just like squishy balls. They're just white, very soft. And sometimes I'll toss those back and forth. You can have any kind of ball. You toss back and forth with a client. A client will be like, why are we doing this? I'm like, yeah, just to get some movement in the body, just to kind of get us moving and kind of feeling our full body. But what I'm noticing is they're going into a more of a parasympathetic state. So I'm using that activity to kind of engage their sympathetic nervous system to kind of bring them out of that parasympathetic state. Pushing can be like pushing up against the wall or pushing a pillow. Stretching can be the same. Having clients stretch is really important. So this idea of having them kind of just stretch out in their body and feel their arms kind of push out, stretch their legs out, feel their legs push out. Again, you're engaging those muscles, which is then turning on that sympathetic nervous system, which is then helping clients to kind of come into their body a little bit more. If you think about depression, it's almost like this disconnection with the body. And so the more we can help them feel into their body, the better. The last one that I have on here is wooing, and this is by Dr. Peter Levine. And if you think about wooing as kind of almost like that horn off of a steamboat in the fog, so thinking about a steamboat that's coming in off the sea and is coming into like Maine or something like that, and it has that fog horn, and it very much is a very distinct sound. And I'm going to do it here in a minute, but the reason why you would have a client woo is because of the vibration it creates in the kind of like the neck area, and that is from the voice box. And so what that's actually doing is engaging their vagal nerve, and their vagal nerve is what controls their social engagement system. And the social engagement system helps them to kind of open up and be more present. And so therefore, if you can get that engaged, then it can create a little bit of stimulation for the client to help them kind of, again, engage that sympathetic nervous system and come out of that deep parasympathetic nervous state. So the wooing sounds like this. And you're making that woo sound, but you're kind of making it from the deep parts of your throat, kind of really engaging that voice box so that you're able to kind of get that vibration going. When I have clients do this, I actually do it with them. Any of the movements I do with them too, because it just helps clients not feel like they're weird, which they'll say, I feel weird. But if you're doing it with them, it's less kind of weird feeling, I guess. So we'll just do a couple of woos, and then we'll stop and just kind of notice what we feel. And usually what clients will say is they feel a little more energy. So I'm going to give us an opportunity to do it together. Even though I can't hear you, I'm going to count to 3. And I want you guys to just woo with me, if you will, if you want to just feel what it feels like. So 1, 2, 3. Woo. Let's just take a minute to kind of notice what happens in our body. So if you'd like to tell me what you noticed in the comments section, feel free to do that. I'm going to check in on a question here from Nashani. She says, what about when a client body is stiff? Is this a form of being stuck off? Yes, it can be that literal frozen state. Sometimes when we talk about frozen, we talk more about the numb feeling or just kind of, just tired and those kinds of things. But it can literally be that their body kind of takes a very rigid state. I've had clients who want to move their arm, but they're not able to move their arm. One of the things you can do with that, Nashani, is just you can actually tell them, imagine moving your arm or imagine moving your body. I just want you to imagine in your mind moving your body. And sometimes that can be enough to get a client to kind of get out of that stuck off state or that stiff body state. If they're really having a hard time, if they're literally frozen. I've had clients with such severe trauma that they are literally frozen in their bodies. Like they couldn't move if they wanted to. And so I'll have them, I just want you to imagine yourself moving, see yourself moving however you'd like to move. If you could move, how would you like to move? Oh, I'd like to move my arm. Okay, I just want you to close your eyes and imagine your arm moving and just feel into that. And usually that's enough to get the body going. What about when a client, oh, that's the same question. Okay. All right, so I don't have anyone telling me about their VUIN experience, so I'm going to move on. But if you want to try that in your spare time, I would encourage you to do so. What I noticed was just a little bit of energy in my legs. I felt a little more aliveness in my legs. Amy says VUIN makes her tingly and more awake. Yes, spot on. If you have a client in parasympathetic nervous system charge, you definitely want them to feel more awake. So that's exactly what it can do for a client. Be careful with VUIN because it can be overactivating to a client. So just, don't do it too much, or if a client has a negative experience with it, just mark it off your list. It doesn't mean you did it wrong. It just means that their system is super sensitive. And so that little bit of movement just kind of sends them straight up. So you can try it out. You can say, hey, let's try it. If it doesn't feel good, we won't do it again. But for some clients, it can be really helpful to help them get out of that more depressed state. There's a video online with Dr. Peter Levine actually doing the VU, if you want to look that up. So 3 things to consider when trauma clients are stuck: clients' sense of safety in session in their day-to-day life, clients' attachment challenges, and clients' nervous system patterning and overall regulation. So those are the 3 things I want you to consider when you're working with clients, when you're thinking about clients. I know this has been a spotty and choppy training, so I would encourage you to go back when the replay comes out. I'm going to try to clean it up a little bit and make it a little more doable for you to kind of get through in a more concise way. But hopefully you guys have gotten something from this and it's been helpful. I do want to share some things with you guys. Don't forget to stay to the end. I got a bonus for you, which I've already told you about a little bit. If you have questions, please feel free to go ahead and type those in. Thank you. I'm going to tear your name up, but I apologize. Thank you so much. I'm glad you enjoyed it. So if you want to continue your growth with the Trauma Treatment Collective, does any of these questions sound familiar to you? Where do I start with my client? How do I really help my client with stabilization? When do I ask for narratives? How do I avoid re-traumatization of my client? Trauma in the brain and the body sounds complex. Why is it important anyway to include in trauma treatment, and how do I even include it? If any of those things sound, like things that you've asked yourself or you wonder about, then I want to invite you to join me in the trauma treatment, Treating Trauma with the Brain and Body and Mind online course. Enrollment's open, so I told you guys I'd tell you a little bit about it. So what others have said in the past trainings: quality information presented that you don't always get in trainings. I found each session very helpful and informative. Treating Trauma with the Brain and Body, here's what the course is like. It's a 4-week course, one lesson a week at your own pace. So I will, drip out, that's a term we use in course creation, and you drip out a module. And so that module will be available on that Monday, and then the next one will be available the next Monday. But you won't have access to the module prior until you finish that module, and then you'll have access to the next one. Each lesson is less than an hour long, so it's very doable, even though we are busy professionals and we're seeing lots of clients and doing lots of things, and we have a life outside of the work that we do. It's still pretty doable because I tried to keep it 1 hour or less as far as each week that you would have to give up. It's an affordable and quality training that you can use immediately with your caseload. So the things that I'm giving you are things that you can take, just like today. These are things that you can take and incorporate into your trauma training or your trauma treatment immediately. So tomorrow, I hope that you guys will go and use some of the things that we talked about tonight. But the great thing about this course is that you will have access to me as you are implementing the intervention. So if something's not going well, or you feel like, did I do that right? Is that how that's supposed to go? Then you can definitely come back and ask me and be able to talk with me about it. And so you'll have direct access to me through a Facebook group or email. If you're not a Facebooker, then you can email me and we can talk via email as well. So there is a Facebook pop-up group that enhances your learning to the course. There's also downloadable course guides, and you have 2 months to complete the course. So that's there. Objectives: you're going to gain understanding of the widespread impact of trauma. You're going to develop skills needed to accurately identify and educate clients about the impact of trauma on the brain and the body. And you're going to learn specific brain and body-based interventions to support your clients on their healing journey. By the end of the course, you will have a clear understanding of trauma, PTSD, and treatment approaches over the course of history. I think that's really important that we know where we come from and where we are today so that we know how to continue to keep informing ourselves and growing in our skills. Tons of interventions delivered with the framework of a protocol that helps you provide trauma treatment in a safe and effective manner. I talk specifically about how I go after trauma. It's not so much how I process trauma, but how I set a client up to get to that processing phase. Because you can do all the process, all this, if you don't do good foundational work with a client, you can try to process trauma, but that's when clients are re-traumatized. That's when clients blow out of treatment and never go back. That's when we hear the horror stories that come into our office and they say, well, my last therapist did X, Y, and Z. And it's a really bad thing. You have to set up the front end. And so I talk all about how to set up the front end and how to make sure that you are treating clients in the safest, most productive way possible. An ability to understand and provide clear and concise psychoeducation about the effects of trauma on the brain, and an understanding of how to start tracking your client's nervous system in session, and body-based interventions to help your client heal. So those are all the things that you will walk away with at the end of this course. 2 options to gain access to this awesome course. Option 1 is purchase now until Thursday. That's tomorrow at 11:59 Eastern time. Pay in full and you'll get a fast action bonus. I have another training that I did, 3 pillars to avoiding re-traumatization. So that will be yours as a gift from me for paying in full and ordering your course before tomorrow at 11:59. If you have already ordered your course and you're watching this, you will definitely get that so that it will already be yours. You don't have to worry about not getting that because you didn't know about it. So yeah, you'll definitely get that if you've already ordered it. Access to an exclusive pop-up Facebook group for continual learning will be also there. So option 1, the fast action bonus, which is valued at $200 for free, totally free, that'll be yours. And a course fee must be paid in full, and the course fee is $147. So it's a very reasonable price. It's not, really expensive. And so that's option 1. Option 2 is you purchase now or after Thursday, October 3rd, and you use the payment plan. So there's 2 easy payments over a month with a down payment of $40 today. You will have access to the Facebook pop-up group as well, but you just make a down payment today of $40. So that's option 2, and then you have every 2 weeks there'll be another payment, two payments after the one today down payment, or anytime after October 3rd. Enrollment will close on Sunday at 11:59 Eastern Daylight Savings Time here in Michigan. So yeah, it'll close 11:59 on Sunday, will be the last day that you can enroll. So you have option 1, like I said, purchase before Thursday, October 3rd at 11:59. Fast action bonus is yours, free of charge, and you have that optional access to the pop-up Facebook group, which I really encourage people to take advantage of. Option 2 is purchase now or after Thursday, it doesn't matter, using the payment plan, and you'll also have that optional access to the pop-up Facebook group. You just make a down payment of only $40 today. So there's 2 nice options there for you guys. Here's, if you're interested in the payment plan option, right here is the actual payment plan. So you just click that and it's going to take you to a different site to get that set up. And you just make that $40 payment and you are good to go. You will be registered and ready to rock and roll. Here's where you can go get the course or read more about it, is at my website, ninakeeler.com, product/course. You don't have to put the / on the end unless you really want to. Again, that's ninakeeler.com /product/course. One more review before we go. This was informative and reinforced some things I knew but were hiding from me. How many of us know that we know these things, or maybe we've heard these things, but sometimes they are hiding from us? And so this course is a really great way to really start putting the pieces together. I really tried to make it a comprehensive course to really put the pieces together for you to really be able to move through the material in a very clear way, so that it's something that you can take into your treatment process, and it's not elusive, or it's not, oh, I got this piece and oh, I got that piece, but I really don't know how all these things fit together. I really tried to make it a very succinct thing. So that's there. All right, so class starts October 7th, 2019. That is 2 Mondays from this, well, a Monday from this Monday coming up. So we have a couple of, no, actually it's next Monday. Sorry, it is next Monday. So we are going to start on Monday. So don't delay, secure your seat today. And again, you just go to nitakilo.com/product/course. All right. Thank you guys for participating. Thank you guys for hanging in here with me. I am sorry for all the technical difficulties. I did not think it would be that hard. You know, Macs are very intuitive, so I did not think it would be as hard as it was for me to get this thing going, but we got it going and we got through the material, and I hope you guys have gained something. The replay will be there for you. Like I said, I'm going to try to clean it up a little bit so that things are a little more together, and it's not all these stops and me fumbling around with my computer. So that you can definitely have that for your viewing pleasure and for you to review the material. So I hope we can connect again. I hope you will consider joining me in Treating Trauma with the Brain and Body and Mind. It's a course that really I poured my heart and soul into because, like I said in the beginning, I'm super passionate about supporting you guys and making sure that you have what you need, but also making it affordable, because that's the number one thing people said to me when I started this community, that the trainings are ridiculous, and they are ridiculously expensive. And so I really wanted to make something that was good in quality, but still affordable. So that's what I've done.